say a quick prayer. All right, guys. So one of the themes that we kind of talk about in this class is characteristics of a servant. And the idea of that is that if we have a very concrete, intentional example about the kind of servant that we want to be, we can put that in front of us as kind of our goal, and we can keep on growing towards it. One of the things that happens sometimes when we talk about these things, it can be really discouraging. We're like, I'm never going to be able to be like that, or and that kind of thing. So, do you guys remember some of the topics for those of you who have been here, over the last few months? What are some of the kind of in the series of the characteristics of servant that we've talked about so far?
Sacrifice.
So servants are sacrificial. Awesome. What else? Do you guys remember? That one. Do you guys remember this?
Humble?
Humility. and interesting. Like, this is a very kind of like showy way to be humble, right? So it's in some ways it's not really great. Do you guys remember the definition of humility? We'll just do a quick review. What does humility mean?
Something about giving God the credit for your accomplishments.
Certainly part of it, yeah. So humility is really about how you see yourself in the context of the world and in relation to God. So it's your self-perspective. So humility, true humility, from the Christian point of view, is seeing yourself the way God sees you. So seeing you as a son or daughter of God, someone who has gifts and talents, but also as part of the family of God. So no better, no worse, than any of the created people who have the same image of God that you do. So seeing yourself with God's eyes. Okay, so I just want to review that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about another characteristic of a servant is someone who leads by example. Super obvious, so I don't want to kind of waste your time. I'm not going to take a big, there isn't really, in some ways, there isn't much to say except, guys, as servants, you're being watched 24/7. Like, it's not just in the classroom, right? So if you are going to be someone who's representing God in the church, and this is true whether you have a Sunday school class or not, the younger people, or the people that see you as a leader, are going to be watching your every move. They're going to be watching what time you come into the liturgy. They're going to be watching who do you speak to? How do you speak to them? Do you say hi to new people? Are you warm? Are you welcoming? How do you dress? How do you treat the other kids versus how you treat me? So all these things are things that they're soaking in. And in some ways, that's going to be more instructive than the actual words you speak in the class. So you can come to the class and you could speak wonderful things, but if they're seeing you, do things that are not ideal, or if they don't see you as a person they want you to be, they're not going to learn much from you. So in some ways, this is a very kind of encouraging way to think about it. In other ways, it's a lot of pressure, right? Think about like, so I have to be perfect in order to be a good servant. Before we go any further, I want to ask you guys, when you guys think about a servant in your life that has been a good example for you, you can say their name, you don't have to say their name, but I'd love for you guys to share, we can have a little discussion. I'd love to hear from you guys. What about that person do you feel made them a good servant, made them a good example for you? Can you think of a servant that's touched your life the most? Be your own parents, it could be a Buna, it could be a Sunday school teacher, it could be anybody. It doesn't even have to be someone from the church. If you're thinking of if you have been involved in other sort of Christian education.
Well, we could just say when I hear our Father is very welcoming. I started coming here, and he made an effort to get to know me. He shows the same amount of love towards everyone in the congregation. And
How do you know that? Like, what does he do? Like, what do you observe concretely that makes it feel like the love is really shared with everybody? And what does he do that's so welcoming?
he makes an effort to say hi to every single person,
Okay.
have a conversation with them, gets to know them.
He realizes when someone new is
Okay.
in church, so he'll make an effort and learn their names. And,
Okay.
you know,
So he's aware of people's names.
Mhm.
He's really good with outreach. He sort of he makes you feel like you're important, right? That's kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
Absolutely good example. So, can you be a good servant and not do those things? So say I just like have a terrible memory and I just never remember people's names and like I'm
I mean, being a
super
good
chat. I'm kind
servant
of
is
shy. I'm kind of not very talkative. Can I still be a good servant?
yeah.
Sure can. So here's one point I want to make. We're going to talk about lots of examples, right? Things that we admire about people. Now, those are beautiful things, and they're things we can aim to emulate. There are some characteristics that just aren't our strengths, and that's okay. There are going to be some people that are just more shy and just are bad with names and don't really have that skill, natural talent. They'll grow in it, but will never really be like a Bunasero. Like that's just they don't have that skill. He has that gift and talent of being able to make people feel welcome and engaged and very quickly. And we can emulate that and we can grow and look at that and say, God, would you teach me how to be more like that? But I may not have that exact same talent, and that's okay. So what we're doing when we're looking at people, leaders of example, we want to look at them and try to be like them, but also allow God to teach us the kind of leader he wants us to be, because we're all going to be a little different. We're all going to have our different strengths. So some other people might just look at that that servant that is just always like kind of, has that quiet, calm, gentle persona, not very talkative, not very engaging, but very calm, gentle, quiet, and is just always kind of in that prayerful mode for their Sunday school kids. And that could be like a very, very impressive, amazing thing to emulate as well, right? That kind of prayer warrior. What other examples when you think of a servant you can emulate?
I know a guy who's probably more well-read than the Pope himself, as far as the fathers and Christology and history of the church, everything related to Orthodox Christianity. And yet, when you talk to him, you not only feel that he's laid back, he's not acting prideful with the way he's choosing his words. He's very humble in the way he speaks to people. And then more than that, he'll actually listen to somebody like me, like somebody who knows even less than me, and get their perspective on all these things, despite the fact that his knowledge is hundreds of times more extensive than ours.
Yeah. So he's well studied, well read, but also open and knows how to listen, take other points of view in humility. That's awesome. A very good example. How about others? I'd love to hear just a little snippet from everybody since it's a small group. And then we'll be done, guys. We're wrapping up.
Well, my Sunday school teacher growing up, which happens to be a Bonavola's daughter, the way she presents herself, her demeanor, her passion for
Passion.
Yeah, her passion
You know
for
that about her, yes.
Yeah, not just about the church, but even in her career.
So she brings an energy.
Encouraging is another one. I grew up with Lydia from Torrance Church, being my Sunday school teacher, and she would always make an effort to text me, call me, just read one chapter tonight, just do it as much as you can. So it was very encouraging and motivating.
Awesome.
So in junior high, I had a Sunday school servant. Her name was Susanna.
Okay.
And I really she was like my favorite servant because I really saw Christ through her. She was very humble, and like Andia was saying, she also was very well versed in the Orthodox faith, which I thought was, I guess, like inspiring, because not a lot of servants, when I was growing up at least, like knew much about the Orthodox faith. It was just, you know, just the Bible kind of thing. They never really taught anything about that. So I think, and she was always very warm and welcoming. Like she had us like over her house for movie nights and stuff like that. So yeah, I liked her. She was a good example.
Yeah, sounds like a really good balance of being like cognitive, like intellectually, academically knowledgeable, but also like kind and emotionally in tune with others. And I liked how you said like she was a really good example of Christ. And you know, that's really the big point here, right? So when we're talking about examples, Christ actually made it very clear in the book of John. He says, "For I've given you an example that you should do as I've done to you." The whole Orthodox Church is modeled by example. After, you know, it's just a bunch of mirrors lined up. It's like, you know, have you heard of the Infinity Room? Like at what is it, Lackawanna, or not one of those, the Broad or something. You go in and it's structured so it's all these mirrors and lights, and it looks like it just goes on for infinity, and you have like 45 seconds to take a picture or whatever. So that's kind of what our Christian lineage is like. It's just mirrors after mirrors, with the central light being Christ, right? And so how to be a good example takes, you have to have that light in front of you. You have to know what that example of Christ is, and you have to spend time with that light to be, you know, able to mirror that appropriately. So that's really what it means to be an example, is to look at Christ and emulate him. There's in the medical world, there's a saying when you're in medical school. So say like you are trying to learn how to put in an IV. Okay, so everyone will tell you this is how you learn how to do an IV. You see one first, then you do one, then you teach one. After you've taught somebody else how to do an IV, that's when you know how to do an IV, and you can do it to any patient you want. So the idea being that first you have to look, you have to observe, you have to just see, and then you have to do it. So let's talk about any spiritual discipline. Let's talk about prayer, okay? To learn how to pray, how do you learn how to pray? Well, you spend time in church. You watch how the church has taught us how to pray. You learn how to do it from the Tebea. You learn from your parents and your friends, and you go to prayer meetings, and we pray together in class, and you visualize how to pray. Then you do it, okay? You can't learn how to pray just by being around people that pray. That teaches you something, that teaches you some of the mechanisms, but in order to learn how to pray, you have to actually pray. You just gotta do it. Sometimes it's the scariest step, because seeing it is one thing, you don't have to get involved, but to actually do it is a little harder. So you gotta do it, you gotta pray. And then to really, really know how to learn how to pray is you teach others how to learn how to pray. You become. So that's one of the gifts that we do, that really being a Sunday school, being a servant is allows us to really solidify. And this is why, I'll tell you, this is why like, it would, I started coming to this church about 1.5 years ago. It would have been really easy for me to just be like, I don't want to, and it was actually, for a couple months, I didn't become a servant. I didn't get involved in the service. I'd been involved in the service for about 15 years prior, but when I came to the church, I was like, I can get a break. And then what I noticed in my spiritual life is, because I didn't have the opportunity to, or I didn't force myself to teach, and things weren't getting reinforced. I got lazy. This is just me. Some people are different, but for me, it's such a gift to be able to have a platform to teach, because what it does is it fulfills that circle of seeing one, doing one, and teaching. So when you think of how you conduct yourself around your kids, it matters if your kids actually get to see you, right? So this is another thing we'll talk about in 2 weeks. We'll talk about like visitations and that kind of thing. That it's important for the kids to see you in class, but it's super duper important that they see you outside of class. And they will. I mean, they'll see you in the liturgy, they'll see you in the fellowship hall, they'll see you around the parking lot, but they really need to get to know you. And so doing things like movie nights and spending time with them, and when we try to do a retreat and hanging out with them, the visitations, like these are things that are so crucial to the service because of this leading by example bit. All right, guys, do you have any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. So next week, we're going to go in depth on the divinity of Christ. So we're going to do a little bit of apologetics. Do you guys know what apologetics is? It's some of the like questions that people who doubt come up with. So it might be a little challenging. So I'm going to ask you guys to kind of like to really question, how do we know God is divine and Jesus is God, and what does that mean? And a lot of the common criticism that skeptics have. So we're going to explore that together next week. All right, guys. Why don't we stand up and pray? Dio, would you pray for us?